Hello everyone. We're going to be responding to a video. It's daylight outside, but it's very overcast. I don't know if I should introduce artificial lighting. I don't think I look that dark. This camera has the effect of God. I'll tell you what. I don't know if I can bother to get into it. I have a rug under my chair so that I don't, ruin my carpet. But the rug gets kind of folded up and creased. Like anytime I readjust the chair, the rug gets moved and it kind of folds over on itself and all that kind of stuff, which is incredibly annoying. So then I got like a plastic thing to lay on top of it because I was like, oh, that would be better. Every single time I move the chair, the plastic thing gets rolled up. And then what happens is, and this is really annoying, like the plastic thing goes one way and the rug goes the other. Anyway, so if you remember last week, we got all of 2 minutes into responding to a video that you guys voted for me to respond to, which was Andrew Gold Peter Tatchell on heretics. So I think we're just going to jump in. I think just because the weather is so miserable and I'm kind of annoyed at my chair, I'm going to have to take a while to get into it. Forgive me if I sound very monotonous and bored for the beginning, but also don't be too surprised if I start to, perk up as it goes along. I also might just straight up, get up and rearrange this situation with the rug and the mat and stuff, because it's annoying I have to keep rearranging it, but it's even more annoying to have it not be arranged properly. All right, let's jump in.
Questioning the government, the police, the judiciary, everything I'd taken previously for granted. And then...
If you questioned everything you'd taken previously for granted, that sounds like a way that someone would become gender critical. I know lots of people who've been like, oh, I had this big moment where I realized, something was different from how I thought it was going to be. And then, having realized that, I started questioning everything. And then I started questioning trans identity. I can understand someone saying that. I can't really understand somebody saying, yeah, I had this moment where I just started questioning everything I've been told. And that's the moment when I decided to go along with the idea that anybody is just whatever they say they are, and trans identity is totally valid, which is, of course, basically what all of, the mainstream establishment says we should believe.
I've been involved in more than 3,000 direct action protests.
Wow.
I've been arrested or detained by the...
I think I can get away with turning this up by... I'm going to turn this up to 1.1 speed, because that will knock off 10% of the runtime of the video, while I don't think it will make a negligible difference to how long it takes to get through. No, what am I saying? It won't seem that fast, is all I'm saying, because this guy talks really slowly.
Mostly by far-right extremists and homophobes, plus more than 50 attacks upon my home.
Aside from anything else, I feel like this guy's gay. I could be wrong, but if he is gay, it seems like, why would you need this whole execution story to make you question things? Surely being gay, presumably this guy's pretty old, so being gay at a time when there was still a decent amount of pushback against homosexuality, gay marriage wasn't legal then, that would be enough to make him be oh, so I decided I wanted to push to fight the establishment. Me personally, if I had quite a core part of my identity and that was legally not considered equal to the alternative, that would be enough reason for me to be oh, I should push back against this.
In the UK until 1967, the maximum penalty for homosexuality was life imprisonment.
Wow.
Life imprisonment.
I didn't realize, I thought this was all further back. I thought sort of World War...
I knew this because Harold Wilson, favourite Prime Minister, was the one who legalised homosexuality. And I think he got into office in 1964. Until 1969, maybe? Or, I don't know. I'm not great with my dates.
And back then, there were no LGBT plus organisations in Melbourne.
Well, yeah, there were no LGBT plus organisations, because that's a nonsense modern concept. Oh, there's a spider outside my window and he's getting some flies again. I love watching that spider. But yeah, LGBT... I mean, as we know, Stonewall, I think they only added the T in 2015. It's kind of funny because there was a thing earlier, I'm not going to include most of it, but Andrew Gold was really shocked at how extraordinarily recent a lot of the anti-gay stuff was, and which I kind of included a bit of, because I was talking how it only was decriminalized in 1967. But with that said, if you want to talk about things that are extraordinarily recent, how about the whole concept of trans identity, and especially the kind of imposition of contemporary trans ideology on the lesbian, gay, and bisexual movement?
There were no positive LGBT plus role models. No one was out in public life. It was a very lonely, isolated existence.
I like the fact of saying like LGBT plus role models, because it's like as if for like a gay person having a biological male be on TV like, I identify as a woman, be like, oh, finally I'm seen as a man who's attracted to other men. Like, what do those two things have to do with each other? It really makes no sense.
Similarly, there was a sexual apartheid in modern Britain based on sexual orientation and gender identity.
So shouldn't that be a sexuality apartheid? Because a sexual apartheid would be between men and women, but I guess he couldn't say that. Because at first when he mentioned sexual apartheid a little while ago, and I was thinking, oh, he's from Australia, obviously he'd be talking about the fact, because there's like a crazy statistic, until 1970, it was legal for pubs. In fact, I think it was basically not just legal, but also standard practice for pubs to not allow women inside. And it was much more common for many, many things in Australia to say women weren't allowed in there. We're not just talking about like men's toilets. So I was like, oh, that's like what he means by sexual apartheid. But then, of course, he couldn't mean that, because then he'd be conflating being a woman with sex. And I guess under his logic, if that pub was saying, women aren't allowed in this pub, that would mean, well, don't worry, if you're just a biological female who identifies as a man, then you're no longer a woman, because that's how the categories of man and woman work according to him. But yeah, instead he's talking about sexual apartheid, meaning apartheid based on sexuality, which, that's also a thing, I guess, but it's just kind of funny to me that immediately if I heard sexual apartheid, I'd be like, oh, apartheid based on sex, and then I'd think, oh, so like the distinction between men and women, and obviously it's just funny that immediately it's like, no, that wouldn't work for him because he's all about denying that.
Lesbian or bisexual, and you had a same-sex relationship, you didn't have rights. It was a clear differentiation based on sexual orientation.
So I think this is where
he just spent like quite a while like stressing this point. I think everyone's aware about like, yeah, gay relationships used to be discriminated against. Like, I agree, but it's like you don't need to like drive the point home. We're all aware.
a lot of people believe that we're impinging upon the rights of other people, which is typically women in this case. What do you say to that?
I think there's a lot of confusion. Biological sex is a reality. So is gender identity. They're two different things. And in both cases, people have rights.
Okay, that's immediately not a response. That's so not a response, because obviously that's irrelevant to the fact that women would say, well, look, it's my right as a woman to not have to be in the presence of biological males. And he's not responding to that, clearly. Yeah.
These are two different things, and there's a space for everyone.
That's not directly addressing it. Look at that face. Andrew Gould's like, that's not really responding to what I said. Oh, God. In a way, I'll be honest, I don't really like debates, as I've said before. But I don't know that I even like the idea of a friendly discussion, because I think the issue with a friendly discussion is that these people are idiots, and it's kind of you're asking a question, but they can't give a satisfying response. I have an auntie. I've mentioned this before, but I have an auntie who is very pro LGBTQ X Y Z, and she was talking about how she's been learning a lot about it, and basically talking about all the politics of it, and saying and it's really important to me that I'm able to educate people on this stuff. And my dad was offering the standard kind of polite, slightly, I guess, conservative pushback of oh, well, I don't really understand it. I think it was I don't really understand what this non-binary stuff is. And she offered up an explanation that was, stupid, because of course the explanation non-binary, basically an explanation. I can't remember exactly which side it was leaning into, but it has to lean into one of these sides. Either the side that reduces the categories of man and woman to sexist stereotypes, saying you don't fulfill the role of a woman or a man, so you're non-binary, or reducing it to being circular. you do not feel like you're a man or a woman. You feel like you're non-binary. Okay, but if that's how you're defining non-binary, you're just including like the definition. Like I could say that about anything and reduce anything of any meaning. And I was listening to this as someone who did this channel. And, at this point, obviously it was a little while ago, a few years ago, but I was definitely doing this channel quite decidedly at this point. I was there and I was like, oh man, like this is so, like I don't want to get involved in this, because it's kind of like, it was very clear that she was enjoying the fact that she like understood this, that she'd like, I don't know, like read an article on like mermaids or whatever, who knows. And like she felt she knew about this topic. And obviously within that context to say like, oh, I don't understand this thing, but with kind of like the expectation or allowing for the possibility that she's just going to offer up an explanation that doesn't really explain anything. And, you're not really going to push back against it. That's one thing. But I was like, oh my God, I'd find it so awkward right now if I was going to actually offer the pushback, because like, and that's just awkward. But again, it's awkward because like, it's more awkward because there's kind of this idea of it being like a polite exchange of ideas, because like, then you're just left kind of like politely being like, with respect, woman who just said you really understand this topic, nothing you said made any sense. So yeah, I don't know, this whole like, but that's the thing, like that's why this is awkward, because it's like, you're being polite. Oh, Mr. Tatchell. It really annoys me his name's not Thatchell. I don't know why. Mr. Tatchell, you're very, I respect you, you're really good fighting for gay rights and all that kind of stuff. How do you respond? Obviously you're an expert on rights, big fan of rights. How do you respond to this very important question around rights and, like conflict of rights? Oh, there isn't one, mate. It's just, there's no, I'm going to pretend he's way more straight than he is. G'day, mate. There's no conflict of rights here.
Any trans person with a history of sexual or physical violence against women, they have no place in the women's prison.
Okay, I mean, like that is like creditable that he would say that. It obviously is kind of like, but they are women, or like according to him, they're women. So it's kind of like, I mean, it's kind of funny because regarding like the whole women's prisons thing, I simultaneously think it is like a really good point to make in terms of like, it's very powerful in the way it speaks to like the people are aware that lots of violence happens in prisons. But at the same time, there is like a rational part of me that's like, well, really the problem is violence in prisons in general, right? Like there's so many, if your concern is making it so people are minimally at risk of violence, of course, biological males, especially biological males who've been convicted of a sex crime, should not be in the presence of women. But also you can make loads of other divisions. And of course, I mean, the other thing I'll say, because it's just a very obvious point of what I'm saying, is that in general, we know that, like this whole thing of like every man is a potential rapist, like that's maybe kind of extreme. And, I don't want to like make everybody terrified here, but at the same time, I guess the point it's getting at is that you do not necessarily know what the risk is in a situation. And that applies just in general. Like one of the things that everyone like kind of needs to learn, and this is like one of the big things, is that a guy who is, maybe very polite, certainly a law-abiding citizen, might actually be a threat to women who disregards their consent. And with that said, we're talking about like just civilians on the street. Once you throw in the fact that this guy's a criminal, saying, oh, but it's not specifically a sex offense, or it's not specifically evidence of violence against women, I don't know if I can like say, oh, that's fine, as long as we factor out those people, there's no problem.
When it comes to women's sports, I'm not in favor of a blanket ban on trans people. I think there ought to be individual assessment.
The ultimate Korean bar.
I'll tell you what, Andrew Gold. Oh God. Oh God. Would you guys be... I don't know if I can get away with this. Okay, we're all friends here, right? So you know that I would only say something as like a joke. But, so essentially I was going to say, because obviously I'm not including this, but there have been so many adverts so far here. Now, Now the thing is, I know that Andrew Gold is how can I put this, of a certain ethno-religious group about whom there is a stereotype that they are very enthusiastic about the idea of getting a lot of money. You know, that's all I'm going to say. You know, if you know what I'm saying, you're with me here. And you know, of course, I wouldn't ever endorse these kind of ideas myself. But I will say the number of adverts that have been on this video so far tells me that you know, he's really kind of conforming to a stereotype here. Is all I'm gonna say. And you know, like obviously, you know, I hope we're all chill after that. I hope we're all cool. I hope we understand that I'm just making an observation. That I'm not trying to you know, attack him in any way. It's just after you've had to skip through your 10th advert in as many minutes, you're kind of thinking, dude, you know, you don't have to be trying to get all this money. You know, like you can just be in it for the love of the game.
The ultimate career.
How about Hero Wars? Like, I honestly am like tempted to download Hero Wars. I mean, this is that thing, isn't it? Like any kind of mobile game that's recommended, there is that curiosity about like what's the deal there, and it's like the thing about advertising sends me into an existential like crisis about humanity, because I'm thinking to myself, the only way, like these advertisers, they're not doing this out of the goodness of their own heart. They're not just like, oh, I want to like fund creative people on YouTube. They're paying for this advert space because they think they can make a profit. Meaning they think, like, basically it's one of two situations. Either one, they must be massively overcharging for something, because how else would they be able to throw out so many adverts in order to get, you know, you'd think maybe just a handful of customers. So like that's the thing, whenever I see like something advertised, even if it's something I like, I'm like, oh, I really like that. Now let me go find a version of that I haven't seen advertised, because I know that if I'm seeing this thing advertised, I've got to be being overcharged in some sense, because otherwise how are they able to pay for all these adverts? But the other thing is, what if it's the case that the reason they're doing these adverts is because these adverts are so successful that it just makes complete sense for them to do that? In which case, that just like has me wondering, like, what society do we live in here where so many people are like going in for this stuff? And that's something I think about, like about all this stuff. I'm just like, the fact that it's sponsoring everything. I don't know. It's just crazy.
Investment. She's trans. She's one of the smallest and weakest members on the team. You can't say that she's got an advantage or that she is, you know, outperforming the woman.
I mean, look, like the issue here is like the fact that if like the logic of how you think about sports would tell you that a biological male who is anonymously weak, who is anonymously short, who is slow, who basically is uniquely physically unimpressive, should not be doing sports. Like, that is just the nature of how sports works. What you would not think is, this biological male actually should be playing sports at some kind of, I guess, like semi-professional or kind of at least, you know, serious level, which is kind of the implication of who he was talking about. Or indeed professional, of course, but, you know, most people don't know a professional sports personality personally. But for the women's team, like, you wouldn't think that. Like, if I said, yeah, you know, I've got a biological male, like, one of the things in, you know, you take like basketball, usually it's very much about height. Obviously there are some short basketball players, but generally speaking, if you're a basketball player, you would expect them to be very tall. And that's kind of just the nature of the sport. You'd be like, the nature of the sport is that it's going to kind of weed out the less anomalously, like the kind of the shorter biological males. But the problem is, as soon as you throw transports into the mix, it's like, actually, you know what? It can create a situation where the shortest biological males are maybe in a good situation in that if they happen to be trans-identified, then they can join a women's team because they can say, oh, well, guess what, guys? I clearly don't have a physical advantage. I'm like 5 foot tall. I'm like Danny DeVito. Well, okay. But the point is, basketball shouldn't be an environment where somebody like Danny DeVito can succeed. Unless, of course, he's, really, really good at, like some other aspect of the game. Like he's really, really good at dribbling and like, blah, blah, blah. It occurs to me, Danny DeVito is, of course, one of the characters in Space Jam. So I guess maybe he can succeed in basketball, just not playing, managing a team of like alien goblins.
It's rare to find even a short man who's gone through whether regardless of their gender identity, who isn't significantly stronger than probably all the women on the team. The person you're referring to must be quite exceptionally weak as far.
Like that's the thing. Like that's the irony, isn't it? Like you're talking about, like if you were talking about someone in sports and you were talking about the idea specifically of this person being able to do sports, then it just should feel naturally wrong. Like there's clearly a part of anyone's brain that should intuitively tell them there's something wrong if you're talking about why this person should be competing in sports and you're saying they're exceptional. Not they're exceptionally good at the sport, not they're exceptionally strong, exceptionally tall, exceptionally fast. No, they're exceptionally weak, exceptionally short, exceptionally slow, and such that they are, as a biological male, arguing they don't have an advantage over biological females, and as such, they should be able to compete against women. But again, the only reason they can do that is because they are exceptionally deficient in lots of things that you'd think would be valuable for sports, and that's exactly the kind of thing that sports exists to not be celebrating or kind of, presenting as a viable pathway to success in sports.
As far as men go.
Well, the rest of the biological women on the team are big, hench women,
Big.
They're biological women.
You could say those women are actually exceptional in ways that are positive for sport. Like that's the big problem with this whole like trans sports thing. Even in this like dream scenario where you have this exceptionally weak man who doesn't have an advantage over women, what you're basically saying is that women's sports should be a place where, okay, exceptional women who have just, like I say, tallest, strongest, fastest women, they have these advantages that are celebrated because they are examples of exceptional women in a positive sense. And that's what women's sports should be for. But also, women's sports should be for a place where exceptional men compete as well. But exceptional men who are exceptionally bad or, exceptionally kind of lacking in certain areas that would be really important. And like, that kind of just shows you, it's almost like shows you how offensive this is, that you've now created a space that exists to celebrate both the most exceptional women in a positive sense and the most unexceptional men in the sense that they are really negative. Like deficient is, I think, a good word to use, basically. They're lacking certain key things that you'd think would be really important for the sport, but the fact they're lacking that thing is the exact reason we let them compete against women. That just seems like almost the worst case scenario, because at that point you're really likely to be kind of diminishing the significance of this sport.
They're cisgender, but they're big bone, very strong, lots of muscles, compared to this friend of mine who's trans.
I mean, yeah, so just for record, of course, like I would not deny for a second. There's some people who will literally say, I mean, I don't believe this, but some people will literally say the weakest man can outcompete the strongest woman in like any test. And it's like, I mean, I swear I've heard people say that, but obviously that's complete nonsense. Yeah, that's insane. But then having said that, of course, like in terms of averages, it is worth taking seriously. I remember there was like a video, I think it was on like the cringe subreddit, which, I like a bit of cringe. And it was basically a woman Marine, or maybe she was in the army, I don't know. Army or Marine. I feel like there was some kind of Army Marine thing going on. Like someone from the Marines challenged someone from the army, but the upshot of it was that a woman had basically said that she could beat, I think she said, any man in a boxing match. And the match started and she got punched once and immediately ducked out. Now obviously, I know that you've got the whole Olympic sports boxing situation where the Italian woman, I don't know her name, got punched once and then ducked out. But obviously in her situation, she was going into it thinking that like the whole point of the sport is that you're only competing against biological females. But this woman, on the other hand, was literally like, yeah, you know what, I could actually take on any man who's in the Marines, in the army. And I'm not one for like lauding the Marines or the army or like saying like that's the height of masculinity. I don't actually think it's particularly impressive to sacrifice your life for a bunch of imperialist wars or imperialist like interests. I think that's actually kind of cringe. I think it's far more manly and alpha to say, nah, I'm not going to go fight in some rich man's war. But no matter what, let's be honest, they're likely to be physically fit. So ultimately, in that context, like that's a ridiculous thing to say. And yeah, if you're like, I mean, that's the main point, isn't it? That women are not going to be able to outperform men who are in a basically similar situation. So if you're a woman in the army, oh yeah, you might be able to outcompete, I don't know, maybe even someone like me, but you're not going to be able to outcompete another man in the army. That's just basically how it is. If you're a woman weightlifter who like goes to the gym all the time, yeah, you might be able to outcompete someone like me. No, I go to the gym a little bit. But whoever, like whatever, maybe Peter Tatchell, you might be able to outcompete him, but you're not going to be able to outcompete someone else who goes to the gym quite regularly. So it's, like when you're talking like for like, the advantage that a man has is phenomenal. I mean, again, woman in the army, clearly I would say a woman who, had some reason to be confident about her abilities, that she was saying like, oh, I could take on any man in a boxing match against another man who, yeah, maybe he was, I mean, obviously quite strong. Having said that, you'd maybe even think like the strongest man would be like, nah, I'm not going to fight this woman. Like, so because a lot of men wouldn't agree to fight a woman, but like there was obviously some man who was like, yeah, okay, fine, she's down for it. But literally one punch and she's immediately like, no. So like that just puts into perspective how massive the difference is.
Already, when it comes to sport, there is individual assessment. Athletes' testosterone levels and other hormones and chromosomes are tested.
Yeah, I think the issue is, like, again, when you get to the individual assessment, it always comes back to the fact it's so clearly wrong-headed to be making an individual assessment where you're basically saying, don't worry, this man is crap enough that we're going to let him compete against women. Like, that just seems like such a dumb... But that's basically what you're doing. If your individual assessment is like, oh, this person, like, they don't have good bone structure, they don't have a lot of muscle mass, they don't have a lot of height. Like, at that point, like, if that's the individual assessment you're making, it's kind of just making a mockery of the entire idea of sports.
But I presume that before that research is conclusive, we don't start putting biological males in female sports and vice versa.
I felt like it also, like, just on the side note, like, obviously there's relative levels of importance depending on how, like, serious it is. For example, like rugby, which I think I'm right in saying that rugby actually is one of the cases where they are, like, quite gung-ho about the whole trans thing. But that's obviously the most dangerous in a way. And like American football, like sports that are like not only contact, but intensely contact. Like if there's a game of football or even basketball, which are, obviously football's kind of contact, but obviously most of the contact in football is supposed to be very safe. And if there's any kind of contact that's unsafe, it's, directed at the ankles, which is one of the reasons why being unsafe is so heavily punished, because obviously anybody, their ankles are going to be weak. Like, obviously if a full-sized man launches himself at a woman's ankles and like shoves his foot into her ankles with the full weight of his body behind it, it's probably going to snap her ankles. But you know what? If he does that to a man, it's probably going to snap his ankles too. So in the case of football, yes, it's a contact sport, but the nature of it is that they're really strict about the contact not being any kind of contact that could cause damage, because it's usually involving areas of the body that can easily be damaged. And then obviously basketball is pretty much a non-contact sport. I feel like that there are times where, like, you're allowed to touch them. I don't know exactly how it works, but, basically, you wouldn't usually expect to see serious injuries in either of those sports caused by, aggressive contact. So within that context, a if a biological male plays against a biological woman, the worst thing that could happen is he just does really well and scores loads of goals, and that's unfair. That's not great. But then rugby, the worst thing that can happen is far more serious. Women could get concussions, they could get paralyzed, they could get killed, really. And obviously, similar thing for boxing. I'd say at least with boxing, like, you can probably, like, again, a woman can be like, okay, no, this is not good, I'll duck out. Like, basically, a woman has the option of quitting, which you don't really have that with rugby as much. Like, you know, you can't just be like, oh, okay, someone tackled me in a way that was quite aggressive, so I'm just going to duck out. Like, obviously that can happen. People ask to be substituted off, but, you know, the point of rugby is that you do take a few hits that are pretty rough and you keep going. So, yeah, like, there's obviously a much bigger danger there. But the other thing about rugby is because there's also the possibility you won't take any hits, it could be the case that it's the one hit you take, that's going to really mess your day up. So, you know, like, I'm sure there are like examples of, you know, rugby players who've been playing a game of rugby, they haven't taken any hits all day, then they take one, and that one paralyzes them. So, you know, it's serious business. And obviously same for American football.
All elite athletes have
Athletes.
advantages. You know, Michael Phelps won all those gold medals in swimming.
Yeah, so this is the thing, again, like, so this is something people say, like, oh, well, every athlete has physical advantages. Again, I feel like I've already covered this. Basically, the point of sports is that you celebrate uniquely fantastic people in a certain group. Someone on my Discord was asking about this and basically saying, like, if you're going to say that biological males have an advantage against women, then shouldn't you have, like, the example they gave was Andre the Giant. Like, shouldn't you have your own classification, your own sport just for Andre the Giant? Because Andre the Giant has, like, had physical, abnormal kind of bigness and, like, strength and stuff like that no other man could compete with because he was physically anomalous. There we go. I was having like a Finding Nemo moment where he can't say the place where he lives. But yeah, the thing there is that I would say premise one is that sports should celebrate people who have anomalous, completely out of whack, insane, exceptional physical advantages. That's what sports should do. Again, maybe you can get into questions of, like, you know, like, is darts a sport where, like, you often get, like, men who are kind of fat and they, like, just drink beer the whole time. Like, maybe, but when you speak about, like, the idealized notion of sports, it should be about these, like, really exceptional people. Okay, so that's question one. But then, okay, if we did that, well, let's be honest, it would all just be the best men. So then you get the next question, which is, well, is there any way in which we should divide sports up so that we are celebrating the best, but we're celebrating the best in a specific category? And obviously, if you divide it up too much, that's ridiculous. So if you say, you know, we're going to divide it up, so we're including the best slow person in the 100-meter race. Well, it's like, okay, but what does that even mean? Like, the best slow person? That doesn't really make any sense. But so really, I think the two big divisions we've made and kind of settled on are males versus females. And again, I'm not really getting into why I think that makes sense, but I think of course it makes sense because females are half the population. It would be kind of depressing if they had no representation at all in most sports, which they wouldn't if there wasn't that idea of, well, we're not just celebrating the best human being, we're celebrating the best male or the best female. The other thing, of course, we have the Paralympics, which is for people who have some sort of disability, but considering they have a strictly defined disability, what have they been able to do in terms of overcoming that? And that's kind of something to celebrate. We also, of course, for like boxing and stuff like that, have heavyweight, featherweight. I don't actually know what's between featherweight and heavyweight. And obviously there, it's celebrating like kind of pound for pound who is the strongest. So, you know, obviously, if you're like a huge guy, well, you're going to be really good at fighting. But you take someone like, you know, Jackie Chan or Bruce Lee, they weren't huge guys, but they are or were really good at fighting. And that's kind of something to celebrate. So, you know, like that's why we kind of have weight classifications in certain sports where being huge is going to have a significant advantage. Although, yeah, I think even that does bring with it issues, because you get people who will like try to drop a good amount of weight beforehand so they can be in like classified in a lower weight, so they've got a better chance. And obviously, it's kind of like, this weird situation where if you're like the lightest heavyweight guy, you're probably going to do much worse than the heaviest featherweight guy, even though you are actually much heavier and probably much stronger than the featherweight guy. The featherweight guy could be the featherweight champion of the world, whereas you might be a pretty unremarkable heavyweight guy because you're cursed to be like beyond, like in that band where you're classified as heavyweight, but there's still a lot of guys who are much heavier than you. So even if pound for pound you're stronger than them, well, they've got more pounds. So like that's why we make these divisions. And the big division that we used to make, we don't make anymore, is the racial one. I think the simple reason there is because we found that having that division, it doesn't cause too much exclusion, or rather not having that division doesn't cause too much exclusion. Like, yes, the average sprinter is going to be black. The average basketball player is going to be black. The average swimmer is going to be white. But generally, we would recognize that it's possible for an exceptional person in a given race to be really successful, regardless of the fact it's not typical. Whereas if we're literally talking about finding the most exceptional person full stop, there's not going to be very many females who are going to be able to like show up at all. So again, that's just why it's much more important that we have that distinction of biological female than is with anything else.
So large. And also there is a cultural aspect, isn't there? Of
yeah, that's a good point. Cultural as well.
Sort of men for
like there's no like historic discrimination against people with flipper feet.
But if they were men, the fact is they won every single game 5-0, which no one else had done at that Olympics, and absolutely destroyed more experienced boxers.
By the way, fun fact, I still have not actually learned anything about Imam Khalif. So I understand the standard narrative currently is that Imam Khalif is a man, and like there's a reason why Imam Khalif is understood to be a man. Having said that, I don't know any of the specifics about it, and I've been meaning in my world famous watch list of YouTube videos I have that I'm trying to work my way through, but it's difficult because I'm a very productive person. I don't have much time to just sit around watching YouTube videos for my own pleasure. When I watch YouTube videos, it's always for work, and I don't really want to talk about the Imam Khalif thing. So like that's kind of that would just be for me. It's taken me a while to get to it, so it's really funny because like everyone was talking about it and I was just on the sidelines like, I actually don't know anything about this and I'm not going to find out because that's just the kind of hilarious guy I am.
We would make individual assessment.
But there is a blanket ban on men going into women's sports, so I suppose that depends if you think those men are women or men.
That's a good point.
There were twin studies in 2013 which showed that where one twin was trans, in non-identical twins, where one twin...
This is irrelevant, like, I don't deny. I mean, I would actually argue that because that I think there is an association between homosexuality and trans identity, if, when we're talking about trans identity, we're talking about gender dysphoria and things like that. Because essentially, like, what is homosexuality? Well, it's a desire to depart from what is typical for a man or for a woman. Typically, men are attracted to women. If you are gay, you are a man who is inclined towards being attracted to other men, which is actually what's more typical of women. So I think in that sense, there is an association between that and, as a man, desiring to be gender non-conforming, or, even desiring to actually present as a woman, even to the point of getting surgeries. And that's why, historically, the vast majority of trans-identified males were gay men. And it's only recently that we've seen the kind of growth of transbians and things like that. In fact, I think I'm actually right in saying that one of the big problems with these studies that show that trans-identified males have brains that are similar to typical women is that they don't account for sexuality. My understanding is that actually the current credible explanation is that gay men have brains more like a typical woman, and as such, if a trans-identified male is in fact gay, is in fact attracted to men, then they're likely to have a brain more like a woman. Whereas a trans-identified male who is basically just in reality a heterosexual man is likely to have a brain typical of a heterosexual man, not of a woman. Like, that's my current understanding, and that would obviously explain all of this. But yeah, the idea that this is something that is genetic, that this is something that exists in the brain, I don't have an issue with that at all. My question would be, well, why does that make them a woman?
So policies are being changed based on something that you yourself admit we need a lot more research done about.
Mm-hmm.
That's the issue that a lot of us have, and that's why support for...
Yeah, this is kind of where I come from. Like, even if this is an open question, which is the best case scenario for trans activism, we're not treating it like an open question. We're expected to basically act as if this is the most certain thing in the universe. Like, the way people talk about this, it's like, yeah, there's absolutely no doubt that trans women are women. It's 100% obvious and certain and definite. And it's like, that is not what the evidence lays bare. And insofar as trans activists are able to present themselves as intelligent, they can only do so by basically kind of walking back the position and being like, well, this is something we need to look into and understand and have a discussion about and stuff like that. Okay, well, tell your side that, because that's not how they're talking about it right now.
With regards to women's spaces, then let's look at the Roxy Tickle and Giggle app. Sal Grover being who was sued and lost, and I think is now going to take it to the High Court. I think what I struggle with is
Australia's a pretty crap country, to be honest. Like they've got all the racism, but also all the gender woo. So there's they're not winning on anything. Like, on all the points where they could be kind of conservative in a bad way, they're conservative in a bad way. But then on the ways that they can be woke in a bad way, they're woke in a bad way. It's like all the downsides of being conservative, all the negative sides of being woke. Welcome to Australia.
But it's up to them to prove to us, rather than me to prove that they shouldn't be in women.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, the onus should be on the people making the claim, considering that they're the ones who want policy to change.
Biological women are other biological women. They are the ones who, on evidence, seem to be committing the most crimes against women.
Well, not men.
Yeah, hold on. That seems like a weird thing to say. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
No, excluding men. Excluding men.
So basically, I mean, it's like kind of a weird thing to say, isn't it? It's like, if you exclude men, women, from the perspective of someone who believes sex is a binary, that's a really funny thing to say.
In terms of women-on-women violence, it's mostly biological women, not trans women.
Although, hold on a minute, isn't that just because there are way more biological women?
Why? So why do we ban men if they've got no history of that?
Well, because women prefer, or some women prefer, to have a woman-only space. So
I feel like he's on the ropes there, right? Because it's like, the obvious response then is, okay, so some women prefer to have a women-only space, but for a lot of women, that means no biological males, so isn't it legitimate, therefore, if they prefer that, to have that?
What traits there are? And if it is, well, I like Barbie and long hair and long nails, that feels like we've gone way backwards. Do you know what I mean? That feels like we're in the 1950s again.
Yeah, it's basically the classic trilemma. Already hinted at it. Either you exclude men, or you have a circular definition, or you glorify sexual or sex stereotypes. You have to do one of those things. And I would need to see an argument for why excluding biological males is the worst of those three options.
With this reaction.
Yeah, but most trans women are not like that. That was the older generation of trans.
No, but the point is, yeah, see, that's the thing, right? Yeah, obviously they're not like that, but the point is, so what are they like? Because that's the problem. A lot of trans activists tell you a lot about what they're not saying. Oh, we're not saying it's just circular. We're not saying it's just about gender stereotypes. We're not saying it's just about getting the surgery. Okay, fine. What are you saying? We're saying trans women are women. Okay, but what does that mean?
I'm not entirely sure how I feel about the concept of an identity at all, as especially one that impacts upon policy, upon politics of a country. What is it? I mean,
has Andrew Gold ever spoken to Alex O'Connor? I was listening to an Alex O'Connor video recently, and they were getting into some deep philosophical stuff, and I'm wondering if they've actually spoken to each other. Oh yeah, they have spoken to each other.
Maybe if we have children one day,
me and you,
separately with our,
or
respective
let's see how it goes.
spouses, but
Yes.
That's quite funny, actually. So Andrew Gold tried to bang Alex O'Connor. He tried to get him butt pregnant. That's what gay people do. Cosmic Skeptic and Andrew Gold / Heretics. Too long didn't read? Alex Gold is Heretics is cringe. Why do people engage with him? Like he knows what he's talking about. Starting to worry Alex may agree with Andrew's transphobia and bigotry. I feel like Alex O'Connor is too smart to not tacitly agree with transphobia and bigotry.
Identities.
I don't have one.
Of course you do. You're dressing like a man. You're not wearing a woman's.
Yeah, I mean, like, everyone does have an identity, right? Like, I identify as Michael. I identify as a man.
Clothing. You're dressing in a deliberately
Well, hold a minute. How you dress, that's not an identity.
male way because you identify as a man.
That's stupid. They're both stupid, basically. Andrew Gold's stupid for saying he doesn't have an identity, and Peter Tatchell's stupid for saying that the evidence someone has an identity is the way that they dress. Like, I identify as a white person. Do I dress like a white person? Not really. I dress like a guy with great fashion sense. Alright, everyone. That's the end of the video. I hope you kind of enjoyed it. I got a little bit bored towards the end. Okay. We made it like half an hour through, which is, to be honest, good. That's a good amount of time we managed to make it through, to be fair. But it's not great. Oh, you know what? I just realized something. Every single time there's an advert, it goes back to 1x speed, and because there were so many adverts, obviously, I at some point forgot to change it back to 0.1 speed, and that means that we were watching it slower. So we could have made like, let's see, so we're like, let's say half an hour in, add on 10% of that, we could have made it like 33 minutes in. Whatever. All right. I hope you all enjoyed. I'll see you all next week. See if you want to continue this. You know, it's interesting. It's just like one of the things about like listening to people have a conversation is obviously sometimes I don't have anything to say because it's like they're just talking to each other. But yeah, it's up to you. Yeah, the power is in your hands as to what I respond to next week. Obviously, let me know any videos that you'd be interested in seeing me respond to. But yeah, just make sure to stay here, check it out for the polls, which we all love voting on, and we'll see what happens. I will see you all next week. Bye!